And we are rolling.
Good morning and welcome to Grounds for Development, your weekly source for 205 Live and NXT reviews and news. Holy balls, we have a show for you this week. If you haven't seen these shows, stop what you're doing right now. Just doesn't matter if it's work, doesn't matter what it is. Go to the network and check these out. There were incredible matches that you cannot miss this week. I am Greg the Hold, your host for this show, and I am joined as always by my good friend and co-host Biff Kensington. How are you doing today, Biff?
Oh, I'm back again for another slice of that Canadian bacon you're serving up, pal. It's another glorious morning. I got the vapors from last night. It was a tremendous night of pro wrestling graps. And I'm never going to say that again, but it was awesome. I enjoyed myself. It's so great to watch two shows that don't suck. So, I'm anxious to get into it. We got so much to cover tonight, dude. The show is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And you know what? I am ready for bed. I slept through the night. I am up for another 4 or 5 hours getting caught up on work. I'm so jacked I couldn't go to bed last night. So I'm excited. Let's get into it, man.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to start off with 205 Not So Live this week, but we'll touch on that a little later on in the show here. The show started with a little recap of the Cedric Alexander-Drew Gulak feud. They started from the SummerSlam match and kind of moved on to where they were. And hey, nothing wrong with that. It was a great recap to let us know what was happening and how we got to this point. Any thoughts on that recap?
I enjoy any time where the show, whatever show you're watching, whether it's WWE, New Japan, what have you, I always appreciate when they take the time to explain where you're at, how you got there. And they do it in such a way where they don't browbeat you over it. You watch Raw and you get 5 or 6 clips every hour, it feels like. It's like you can never forget. Here, they give you the opening, they let you know where that's going, and you strap in and you get ready to enjoy the ride. And Drew Gulak, he's got such a unique style. Him and Cedric, they have good chemistry. I like their match at SummerSlam. I was looking forward to this match tonight. Thought it could be one of the best matches of the week, and boy, howdy was it. We're talking about two of the best in their own ways, and it really got me pumped up for tonight and set the table for what turned out to be one of the best episodes of 205 Live that I've seen in months.
Absolutely. It was a great match that we're going to get to shortly. But before we get to that, we have our first match of the night. We have one TJP versus Lince Dorado of the Lucha House Party. I thought it was a great match. Lince is your classic luchador. It's does all the classic luchador moves, looks good. TJP, he's a good arrogant heel, and he's just got that face that you just waiting for his opponent to just punch him. He's just got that punchable face. He's way better in the heel role than he ever was as a baby face at the start here.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Did you have to add on that?
Well, it's a shame that he's such a good heel because the theme song was always such a babyface theme song. I love the theme song, and I do appreciate that he's got like a remixed version of it to where it's a little more heelish. But I completely get what you're saying. He's got that easily punchable face. You just want somebody to walk up and smack him. This match, I was so excited for the main event, and I knew that we were getting the main event with a lot of time from the reports, so I was excited to get there. This match kind of grew on me. It wasn't my favorite match ever, but it was definitely a solid match. It started out kind of unique. It almost felt like one of those old school WCW Cruiserweight matches where they kind of started out, with some of the flippy stuff and just kind of feeling each other out. But then it settled into more of a WWE-style Cruiserweight match. I thought it developed nicely. Let me tell you something. TJP and Lince Dorado, they better have their antibiotic ointment handy. They're going to need it from some of the hard-hitting chops that were delivered in this match. Poor TJP was already bruising up at the end of the match.
So, yeah, no kidding. There was some definite hard punches and chops in there. And I'll give a throw out to TJP here. I loved the variations that he was putting on some of the rest holds there. It wasn't just your standard headlock or the knee in the back. The butterfly looked good. You know, the little wrist manipulations and arm manipulations, you know, added a little something extra to the match. And like you said, it started a little different, and I was also pumped more for the final match here. But this one grew on me, and it was a good, solid match. And I actually loved the ending of this match with TJP pulling off Lindsay's mask. I've always loved when people go for the luchador's mask, especially the heels. It shows just that irreverence for where they're coming from in the history of the luchadors. So I always pop for whenever there's a spot like that.
Yes, and I appreciate Nigel going into a little bit of a discussion on why it's so important. You know, if that would have been on Raw, there's a 50-50 shot that they would have even brought it up. You'd be like, why is he so concerned about his mask? Well, in Lucha Libre, that's a huge point of honor, and I appreciate Nigel bringing it up. It's just those nuanced layers of commentary that add to the product. We see it on 205 Live, and we especially see it with Mauro Ranallo and Nigel down at NXT. So it's just a little treat there that I appreciated him throwing in.
Absolutely. It was a nice touch, and it just adds to the show and your appreciation for what's going on there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so TJP wins, or, you know, the good heel win there, and that was that match. It was a good match for what it was, and from there we moved on to a little backstage segment with Lio Rush and Drake Maverick, kind of addressing why the announced match that they had announced last week isn't happening due to Leo showing up on Raw and being buddies there with Bobby Lashley. So I appreciate the... What's that?
It took it out of him to show up on Raw. So.
Exactly right. It's pretty funny stuff. And I loved Maverick's bright orange blazer there. I don't think there's too many people in this world that could pull that off. It looked good on him.
It's from the Hulk Hogan collection. Matches his skin color a little bit. So. But I tell you something, I'm really coming around on Lio Rush. There's a lot of people that don't like him because of what happened last year with the situation with Emma. But I tell you what, he's young. I mean, he made a mistake. He did his penance for it down in developmental. This kid has a really bright future. You can tell that he's got a lot of potential. He's a little bit small, but he can talk. He's got a lot of charisma, and he's got star presence about him. I'm really looking forward to seeing where he goes in 205 Live.
Absolutely. Like anyone that can talk and have the charisma that he has, even if it's the heel charisma, doesn't matter. That's going to get you places. The size, you can work around the size. If you can talk it up and sell a match, you're going to go places. And I see bright things for his future.
I do too. I think he's got a really bright future. And plus, with his appearances on Raw, it's obvious that the company sees something in him. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting him in such a prominent role on Raw, hanging around Bobby Lashley like he has been. So, you know, it's obvious the sky's the limit. As long as he can keep his head down, I think that he's going to go places. We'll just have to see what kind of role they have for him moving forward. Absolutely.
From that segment, we moved into another backstage segment with Mr. Drake Maverick and Mustafa Ali. I thought it was a good segment. I liked how Drake was making it look like Ali wasn't going to get his shot at a Tommy. And I was kind of like getting like, oh, come on. I was actually a little disappointed until they threw that little swerve there and announced it for next week. So
pulling his chain a little bit. So
it was a nice little touch. It wasn't the standard, you know, yes, we're going to do this next week. They put a little spin on it, and I appreciated that.
I did too. It actually, as a fan, it kind of made me appreciate the match even more, because at first you think you're not getting it, and then you realize you are getting it. So it's like, okay, cool, we're getting that match, and then your brain clicks, and like you're about to see Mustafa Ali take on Hideo Itami. You know, damn Skippy, you're happy for it. So it's just a nice little kind of treat to kind of throw it in. I got to throw this in there too, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, but I appreciate the fact that Drake Maverick's characterization hasn't really been all that affected by his move to Raw as AOP's manager. They're almost separate characters, what he's doing on Raw versus kind of the babyface-oriented general manager on 205 Live. I'm glad they didn't change his character up. He's still pretty much the same Drake Maverick that he was before he became the manager on Raw. So I appreciate that from the people kind of scripting 205 Live.
Absolutely, because, you know, just because he's on Raw playing arguably a heel, I don't need him to change his 205 Live persona, because it's working. It's a good persona. And to be quite frank, I am so sick and tired of villain authority figures on shows. It's refreshing to see somebody who kind of leans to the face side a little bit.
I 100% agree. And I know we sound like a broken record and we keep, giving the accolades to 205 Live and NXT, but that's what sets them apart. Honestly,
Absolutely.
It really is. And SmackDown to an extent, too, because Paige is also kind of playing the babyface role right now, which, surprise, surprise, SmackDown is a very popular show right now as well.
Exactly.
But yeah, the heel authority figure is just so played out. Raw is just, you know what it is? It creates a depressing atmosphere. It doesn't create an atmosphere of excitement like a babyface GM does. And I guess it's because the GM babyface or the authority babyface figure, you figure the storyline is essentially they're trying to give the fans what they want. And so there's an aura of this is our show. Whereas, the heel authority figure is set up in line with the company, and the company is essentially the biggest heel in the promotion. And so it's kind of set up to what the company wants. And it just creates a different ambiance that really affects your mood watching the show. I don't know many people that go into Raw excited these days, but you sit them down for SmackDown, NXT, 205 Live, especially if they're fans, it's a complete 180. They're excited to see what happens. I'm excited for 205 Live next week. There's some matches I really want to see. And I know that there's a better than 85, 90% chance that they'll deliver. And you just can't get that from Raw these days. And I think it has a lot to do with how the shows are structured.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. It's why I'm having so much fun doing this show with you. These two shows are in and out my favorite shows of the week for WWE product. And I mean, SmackDown has definitely been good. Like this week's show is actually very excellent, but these two shows make all the main roster shows pale in comparison the last little while.
They really have.
Yeah. And then we move into our second and actual final match of the night from those backstage segments. We have the Cruiserweight Championship on the line with Drew Gulak and Cedric Alexander. And wow, this was a good match. There's I don't even know what to say. It started off real quick. Gulak went for the Gulak to try to finish early. It was a great match. And I love the fact that, they ejected, Gallagher and Kendrick off from ringside, so there was no interference. You knew you're going to get a clean finish at the end there. So it was a great match. And you have any thoughts you want to share on this one?
Yeah, it was an excellent match. Really incredible. I loved it. Hard hitting. The commentary, especially. I can't say enough good things about commentary this week. I am not always the biggest fan of a 3-man booth. Honestly, there's not many 3-man commentary or 3-person commentary teams that I like from wrestling history. But this week, all three, they just really stood, they really rose to the occasion. They kind of added more to the product. They really established, Drew Gulak, especially once we got Gallagher and Kendrick backstage when they were thrown out from ringside. It was really established, Gulak, he only has a finite number of chances left. He lost cleanly at SummerSlam despite his own protests. If he loses again tonight, he's going to the back of the line. They really sold the fact that this is pretty much it for Gulak. And it added a certain level of intensity and desperation for him through their commentary. And I appreciate that because that's a little nuanced layer of pro wrestling that we often don't get on the main roster shows. They don't really sell the fact that, historically, championship opportunities were earned. They weren't just given. Paige. Sorry, I had to let that in. But they did the same thing in the opener with TJP and Lince Dorado. They were talking about TJP's losing streak and how, being on the snide was taking opportunities away from him and that he needed to get a win against Dorado just to reestablish himself and put himself back in line for future opportunities. I love when commentary adds to the product. They did it in the main event. I thought that it was a tremendous match. It was a real cerebral match. Gulak, I love the way he moves in the ring. He's just got that old school vibe about him. And I'm a huge homer for my boy from Charlotte, Queen City's favorite son, Cedric Alexander. 160 plus days, closing in on a half year now for the Cruiserweight champion in his title reign. Great match, just absolutely great match. And the crowd was into it. And we'll talk a little bit about why, but the crowd was into it, and that is such a great sign.
That was such a good thing to see. And they actually had one of my favorite spots of the whole night between the two shows in this match, where they were doing the trying to suplex, and then they suplexed over the top rope. And I don't think I've ever seen that spot in wrestling before. And man, was that incredible.
Never seen it. It was inventive. I was scared to death. I didn't know what they were doing at first. All I can say is Cedric Alexander and Drew Gulak, you are bigger men than I am. I lack the fortitude to even try something insane like that.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's just, and as crazy as it looks, I'm venturing to guess it's relatively safe compared to some of the planchas and pescados that they're normally doing. Not to say that getting suplexed on the floor feels like landing on a bed of roses, but I mean, just, visually, it was stunning. And that lumbar check to Gulak at the end. Ugh. Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how they pull that move off. I honestly don't know how somebody hasn't, cracked a rib or dislocated a spine on the lumbar check. That
move looks so brutal every time I see it. And one other thing I really appreciated in this match is, and it kind of sold how much it meant to Gulak, is when he actually climbed the top ropes and flew. Like, you don't see Gulak doing top rope moves. So, I mean, that kind of sold for me, like, oh, okay, he's really, really wants this championship. So it was a nice touch.
Yes, absolutely. And another tribute to commentary, they brought that point up. They didn't just let you fill in the dots. They led you where the story was going. And the story was Gulak is taking high-risk maneuvers for the first time in forever because it means that much to him. Absolutely. Great catch there. Gulak, you need to be a little more careful suplexing Cedric Alexander. He damn near dropped him on his neck.
Yeah, that was a scary-looking spot.
Oh, that was gnarly. Now, it wasn't the most painful spot of the night. We'll get to that, Mr. Pete Dunne. But Gulak, ease up on my boy. Cedric Alexander, he's got places he's got to go, man. So let's ease up on the Queen City's favorite son there, pal.
Yeah, no, I can't say enough good things about this match. Definitely, if you need to watch a match, go watch this match. It was a really, really solid match. Cedric ends up retaining in the end with the lumbar check. Gnarly looking lumbar check. And after the match, they went into a little interview with Buddy Murphy to hype the championship match coming up at Super Showdown in Melbourne, Australia.
That's going to be a hell of a match. I'm so glad that they are giving that match a proper build. They're going to have a couple of weeks to really set the table, but they've already started the build towards it, talking with Buddy Murphy. They're treating it like a big deal, and you know what? It's coming across like a big deal. Just like the Gulak title defense tonight did, every title defense Cedric Alexander has feels like a huge deal. And that's a testament not only to 205 Live, but it's a testament to him. I really thought coming out of WrestleMania that a lot of people were kind of rooting for Mustafa Ali. I kind of felt like people were maybe a little disappointed when Alexander won the title. I wasn't, because, hometown favoritism and all that. But and plus, Cedric Alexander is one of the best wrestlers in the world. So it's not like we're getting chopped liver here. Cedric Alexander is freaking amazing. But he has done nothing but impress. He has made that title, relevant. And he's really followed in the footsteps of Neville in making that title mean something. I can't speak highly enough about the job he's done. He's just been kind of the quiet workhorse of the show. He's just been carrying that title with prestige and class. He's been the MVP along with Buddy Murphy. And it's classic Pro Wrestling 101. You have the fighting champion against the juggernaut challenger that doesn't look like it can be stopped. So we'll see in Melbourne, Buddy Murphy and Cedric Alexander. That's going to be a big fight.
I'm looking so forward to that match. Like, I can't foresee how that could ever be a bad match. There's nothing wrong with that match in my books. It's a shame that it'll probably end up on a pre-show, but it doesn't matter. It'll be worth the check.
Do you think you got a prediction for it? Because I got to be honest with you, the more I sit here thinking about it, the more I think we're going to see a title change. I really do.
I'm kind of, I kind of lean towards yes, but then I also know WWE's history of making the hometown hero the loser of the match. So I'm not sure. Either way, I'm not going to be disappointed if either one of those guys comes out of there holding the championship.
Honestly, I'm in it for a good match. Obviously, my heart is with Cedric Alexander because I'm a huge fan of his. And he responds to me on Twitter. So Cedric Alexander, open mic for you, pal. Anytime you want to come on, the golden microphone is yours. Open, free invitation. But Cedric Alexander, I love him. He's one of my favorite wrestlers in the entire company right now. So I'm obviously going to be rooting for him. But just from the perspective of a fan of this show and a fan of a lot of its performers, Buddy Murphy is an incredible athlete. I think that we're going to get a real showcase for him. He's going to have the hometown energy. And it's going to be that big fight feel. They've done a great job of establishing the title as being worth all the attention that's being paid to it. And you're going to be in front of 60, 70,000 people. So we're going to see, kind of what we saw at WrestleMania. We're going to see if Buddy Murphy and Cedric Alexander can rise up to the big stage. I thought Alexander and Mustafa Ali did a great job in New Orleans. I'm excited to see what these two guys are going to do in Melbourne.
Absolutely. That's going to be a great match. All in all, this was a really solid show for 205 Live. I'd probably give it a solid A in my book. There was nothing wrong with it. It was good. Two good matches. Well, one good match, one great match, and a couple solid backstage segments. So A for me. It was a great show.
Concur 100%. I'll co-sign on that. I mean, I love the fact that they gave the main event plenty of time. You knew that it was going to be an important match. It was basically built up as a two-match show from last week. One of the two matches we were supposed to get wound up being delayed a week, and it was still an A show because the main event delivered. I really enjoyed the TJP Dorado match to open the show. Promo work continues to be a strong suit. I love that they're giving these guys a chance to talk and establish characters. Can't say enough good things. This was absolutely an A show for me tonight. And then we follow it up with another A show in my book, NXT down from Full Sail. You talk about, a great compliment. If 205 Live was, the premium appetizer, here comes the steak. Here comes your steak dinner.
Yes, absolutely. This again, another solid show from NXT. Opens with a little Ricochet versus Dunn hype video. Like we've said on last week's show, and everybody knows, whenever WWE does these hype videos, you're getting solid production. They're great. They make everything feel important, and this is no different.
Does it bother you any that the same company that can take in 2 or 3 weeks a simple setup for a match like Pete Dunne versus Ricochet make it feel bigger and more important than anything going on the main roster right now? Does that bother you at all? Because on some level, it bothers me that they don't put as much effort on the main roster as they do down at NXT. You would almost think that level of effort would be greater on the main roster, but here again, in the span of 3 weeks, they've built up Pete Dunne versus Ricochet as one of the biggest matches in the entire company. And this is coming off a pay-per-view that was pretty good. So, kudos to NXT for really establishing this match as something else. I mean, you talk about big fight feel. We mentioned it in the Cruiserweight title match. This one was probably even bigger of a fight, even more of an atmosphere, with the Full Sail crowd just being molten for this match. But I'll tell you what, that promo package was just kind of whetting the appetite because, boy, oh boy, I mean, this was a good show, but all eyes were looking towards that main event.
Oh, absolutely. So before we get there, we've got the rest of the show to go through, and we started our show this week with a women's tag match featuring Dakota Kai and Deonna Purrazzo versus Aaliyah and Lacey Evans. This was a solid tag match. I'm not even going to put the disclaimer of women's in front of it. This was just a solid, good tag match. Evans and Aaliyah actually get the heel win over this, and like it was just a good match. What are your thoughts on this one, Biff?
It was a pretty dominant match, actually, for the heel team. The hope spots for the baby faces really weren't all that significant, so that was kind of a interesting way they put it together. As far as the match itself goes, I'm going to echo some of what you said. Just a really nice slice of classic tag team wrestling. But there's a deeper layer to that I want to touch on, and we talked about it a little bit off the air. It's really something that I think speaks to the evolution of women's wrestling. And when I talk about the evolution of women's wrestling in the WWE system, I don't want to use it as a catchphrase or a buzzword like the WWE does. I'm talking about the actual evolution of women's wrestling in the WWE system. And tonight is one of those, quiet examples of the improvement that we've seen. You said it perfectly. It's not just a great women's tag team match. It's just a great tag match. Solid heel psychology, cutting the ring in half, doing the blind tags, drawing in the baby face, building up for the hot tag. These are little tiny things that you pick up over decades of watching wrestling as a fan. You absorb, all the nuances of tag team wrestling. You've seen all the classic tag team matches in the past, all of the great tricks of the trade. And, you be a fan long enough, you pick these things up and you start to recognize their influence in all of tag wrestling. And then when you see Aaliyah and Lacey Evans, who are not exactly the most established tag team. Okay, we're not talking about, two women that have been tagging up for 10 years and have, solid chemistry or anything. It's pretty much a makeshift tag team going up against what is essentially another makeshift tag team. But they're wrestling, a style that is not out of place. It fits perfectly. It's just great, solid, fundamental wrestling. And it makes you realize how far women's wrestling has come in WWE. That is not a trait that is universal to the WWE's women's division, especially in the past. We've come so far from the last 5 or 6 years, especially in the last 10 years. Can imagine where we were in the Divas era on the main roster, where it was almost an embarrassment to see people that had no business being in the ring trying to pretend to be wrestlers. Fast forward 10 years later, and, I know we're all sick of hearing about the women's evolution or revolution because it's just a PR buzzword now, but there is a very real evolution that's taken place here. Women's wrestling, the basic level of women's wrestling has elevated so high that, it makes me proud as a wrestling fan. It makes me happy because it's something different, it's something new, but it makes me proud of the work that people like Sarah Amato are doing down in NXT and the Performance Center. The baseline of what it takes to make it as a female performer in the WWE is higher today than it's ever been. And that is absolutely tremendous for the quality of women's wrestling. If you're a fan of women's wrestling like I am, this is, just a quiet example of the good things that are coming our way in the next 5 to 10 years. Because this match, while it may not look like much on the surface, you break it down and you look at another layer of it, and you recognize just the simple, basic quality that did not exist in women's wrestling in this company 5-10 years ago. The sky's the limit. It's going to be something really special because these women pick it up so quick now, and they've got such a dedicated training staff that they're not just training them to do spots, they're training them to wrestle. And for the parity of women's wrestling, raising that quality and giving them the spotlight they so richly deserve after all of the garbage they've had to put up with over the years, can't praise the Performance Center enough. They're doing a tremendous job.
Oh, absolutely. And I echo every sentiment that you shared there. It's so good to see this. And it's just going to be a boon for women's wrestling going forward here. I also just wanted to touch quickly on Lacey Evans' look. I appreciate the kind of throwback to the good old pinup girls of the war era. It sets her apart from everybody else out there, and it's just a cool classic look, and I'm glad that they're not just trying to make everybody the eye candy that they used to be. That's another great step forward in the women's evolution, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely, and there again, that's another great point to raise, because you see, all four women have distinct style and look. In the past, especially on the main roster, the late 2000s, there was a really bad precedent of almost like cookie cutter system where all the women just kind of look the same because they're doing all the same spots. They're all from the same general background. Well, it's no secret how women used to be hired by the company. They used to be hired out of the modeling catalog. John Laurinaitis would literally pick women out of catalogs that he thought would look good on TV, and that's how they became wrestlers. Whereas you flash forward to last night's episode of NXT, you see Dakota Kai, who on a glance looks like she's a clone of Bayley, but you look closer and you realize that she's a little bit more confident than Bayley, and she's kind of almost like an anime character come to life, sort of. Deonna Purrazzo, I mean, she's got that cool, confident, cocky swagger about her. Aaliyah, the classic, cocky heel look, I guess you would say, but she's come a long way from her days on the Breaking Ground, I think it was, the show, the reality show on the network. I think that's what it was called. It's been so long now.
Yeah, I can't remember.
William Shatner was the narrator for it. I want to say it's Breaking Ground, but Aaliyah, she's come a long way. And like you said, Lacey Evans with the kind of the retro look, what's old is new again, makes her stand out. But, they're letting them, develop their own personas, their own kind of aura. They each carry themselves in a unique way, and it really adds to the presentation. It's refreshing to see, NXT is not just following the old cookie cutter formula. I mean, they had a great success with the Four Horsewomen, but instead of just cloning the Four Horsewomen over and over again, they're allowing the women that have followed to kind of forge their own path. And so you've got Lacey Evans coming up, who I am really high on. Shayna Baszler has come a long way in the last year, working in the developmental system. Kairi Sane, Asuka, Ember Moon, Nia Jax, they all forged their own special little path. And it's really made NXT's women's division a diverse and interesting and really an integral part of the show. That's the hallmark of, good wrestling. If you take their segments out of the show, will the product suffer? In NXT's case, hell yeah, it'll suffer. You lose a lot if you take away the women's division from NXT. So that's, there again, it's a hallmark of how far we've come, to where, you take the women's wrestling out of NXT, and NXT, you lose a lot of its soul. So can't speak highly enough. It was a good tag match. It's not going to light the world on fire. I know we've given it a lot of praise, but, just in general, I love what I'm seeing from all four women, especially Lacey Evans. I'm really high on her. I think she's got a bright future. We see a video package later on for some other women that I'm really high on. Bianca Belair. Obviously, Candice LeRae is obviously very talented. So this was a great little way to start the show. And we followed it up with, you got another great little promo from Velveteen Dream, almost an impromptu press conference setting. Just kind of letting people know that, hey, Velveteen Dream's there. Jackson Riker, also the Forgotten Sons, he's got a debut that I know you want to talk about a little bit. But just a fun, breezy show to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that women's match, like you said, we moved into the little dream segment. And then there was also the Street Profits interview that they did there. And you know what? I like the fact that it wasn't just both of these, in fact, weren't just your normal, typical backstage interview or set up in front of the little screen. Dream's interview almost had like a locker room after the game vibe to it, which I really appreciated. It gave it a little something that stuck out. And then the Street Profits was as they're walking down the street coming from a pickup basketball game. And I thought that Montez Ford really, really shone in this video. Like he came across so well. He did really, really well. And you know what, I'm starting to get more and more on board with Montez there.
I am too. I think the Street Profits could be a very solid tag team, and a tag team to look out for in 2019. I know the NXT tag scene is really starting to get full, which is good. But you got a lot of teams, the Mighty, the former Mighty Don't Kneel TM61. I guess they're now the Mighty, but they're still kind of lurking around. You got the Street Profits. Heavy Machinery is still kicking. Everybody loves Otis. Just say Otis. Otis is just such a great name, So, and he's got a nice Chris Farley routine down right now. He made Tommaso Ciampa corpse almost during their promo last week, which I went back and watched and thought that was kind of funny. But between Heavy Machinery, you have really a good undercard tag team scene to go along with kind of the main event scene, because you've got Lorcan and Birch, who were really getting hot there before the injury kind of slowed them up a little bit. Of course, British Strong Style always lurking, Mustache Mountain. You've got the Undisputed Era, of course, the tag team champions. What more can you say about them? They're tremendous. The War Raiders, they're obviously going to have their run sooner rather than later. They're going to be the next coming of the Authors of Pain for NXT. So it's going to be interesting to see where all of these tag teams kind of filter out. I guarantee you this, the next time we have a Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, we're going to have a loaded field, because the tag team scene is so quietly becoming one of this show's strongest components in terms of depth, just overall depth on the show. Really looking forward to seeing the next tag team tournament they're going to put on.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that they're not all clone tag teams. You've got, War Raiders, Heavy Machinery, you got your Big Bruisers, you got Mustache Mountain, who's your, as technical as they get. You got Undisputed Era, technical, but also, the power moves. They've got everything. It's a nice throwback to the mixed tag teams and back in the 80s and early 90s, when it wasn't all cookie cutters. You had a whole bunch of different things, and choose your taste and follow that team.
Exactly. And because there's so much talent to feature and so little time during the week, you're never going to really get burnt out. If anything, you could almost stand to have a little bit of a longer show so that we're not going quite so long without seeing these teams in action. But that's what these, backstage segments are so good at doing, is kind of keeping them in the, keeping them in your mind, letting you remember, hey, these guys are still hanging around, and they vary it up, which another good point you brought up with the Velveteen Dream promo, how it kind of felt like a sporting event after a big game, with all of the cameras and cell phones kind of stuck in his face. Then you had the Street Profits outside. They don't just use the same backdrop over and over like you see on Raw, which I appreciate. It just varies up. It keeps it fresh. It keeps it feeling new. So yeah, it's, a lot of depth in the tag team division, and they do just enough with the promos and the vignettes to keep you up to date on who the big players are. I look forward to seeing where the tag team division goes in the months to come. It's kind of like the women's division, where they're kind of stocking the shelves. They're stocking the shelves. They're getting the ingredients together. Like the women's division, you can tell with all the talent that's coming in from the Mae Young Classic, it's going to, ignite and catch fire really soon. And the tag team division, I feel, is kind of the same way. And oh, by the way, Tommaso Ciampa is the heavyweight champion of NXT. That's not chop liver either. So I promise, folks, we will talk about bad things when they happen, but we can only work with what they give us, and they're giving us good stuff. So, we kind of gush on it. So
absolutely. And speaking of good stuff, the next thing was a little recap of Nikki Cross and Bianca Belair's match from last week, and just touching on the fact that, hey, this is going to continue, and I imagine that we are going to get one hell of a good match from this when it does show up on our screens again.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, how we felt like their match was like the first 10 minutes of a really great match that got cut off before it should have. They've got a better match in them. Now, where that match takes place, whether it's on another episode of NXT, if it shows up at War Games in November, maybe, we'll see. I don't know if they're going to drag it out that long. That's something that we're going to be talking about here after we get done with the NXT recap, we're getting on to the point now where they're going to start to set up the storylines for War Games, and there's so many different ways they can go. But this promo from Bianca Belair, she promises to show up and show out every time she's in the ring with Nikki Cross. I continue to be impressed with her. Nikki Cross, what more can you say? We're all just kind of waiting for her to get the call up at this point, but she continues to do good work. This is what NXT is best at. We keep saying it over and over. It's the promos, the vignettes, the packages that let you know what's going on, how people are feeling. Just keeping it in your forefront. They don't beat you over the head with it. They do just enough to keep you interested. And that's the hallmark of great pro wrestling.
Absolutely. And after that recap, we moved into our next match of the night, which was Humberto Carrillo versus one of the members of the Forgotten Sons, Jackson Riker. It was basically a squash match. Poor Humberto pretty much got pummeled. I kind of thought that actually he kind of looked like a little bit of a clone of TJ Wilson, to tell you the truth, minus the strange hair that TJ used to rock there. But, it was basically your squash match, but that slingshot power bomb that Jackson Riker finished him off with, that was a pretty impressive looking move.
I always give extra props for the springboard effect because I'm a Tully Blanchard fan, so the springboard suplex was always a favorite, and springboard powerbomb, that's always adds a little bit to it. Poor Humberto. I mean, it's just Humberto was not gonna get over in this match at all. This is a squash for Riker, who looked visually impressive. Didn't really do a whole lot, but he had a definite presence about him. Got a good look, I think. Kind of that rugged look that the Forgotten Sons are kind of portraying, which is good. Wesley Blake obviously has that look as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going with the Forgotten Sons. I kind of feel like the Forgotten Sons may be kind of biding their time until we get more call-ups. NXT is kind of getting a little crowded, actually, with all of this talent. We talked about it a moment ago where they're doing a good job of cycling their talent through these vignettes to keep them fresh, but there's so much going on in NXT right now, so many different levels, and we're about to talk about the next installment of the investigation William Regal is doing. But the next two packages, really, all of these, little storylines are being spun off from the investigation plot line. Candice LeRae goes backstage to talk with Regal, and he points out, where was Gargano? Where's your husband during this beatdown? You're pointing the fingers at Tommaso Ciampa, but, do you have an alibi for your husband? We had the Lars Sullivan EC3 segment, which is another recap that we saw last night. That was spun off the investigation. We have a match next week, Tommaso Ciampa and Otis from Heavy Machinery. That came from the investigation storyline. So this one central storyline is just spinning off all of these little sub-stories just over time. It's really tremendous writing. It's really tight writing for the NXT staff right now. I really approve of what they're doing with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's great. And I love, Candice wrestling is in there supporting her husband, pointing fingers at his arch rival. And, and then Regal kind of points out, hey, it's like, he's more or less been cleared, but what was your husband doing? And she has to admit that she doesn't really have an alibi for him. So does that mean it's Johnny Gargano? Not necessarily, but it's once again adding great layers onto layers that this story has been doing. And like you said, you're the EC3 Lars Sullivan, all was rolling out of that. Ciampa and Otis. So it's just good, tight storytelling that's tying into a central theme, but not, chat or focusing on just one thing. It's overarching throughout the whole show. So it's great stuff to see.
Yeah, it's greatness begets greatness. And, the storyline is interesting. It's been interesting for a while now, and they're really doing this nice slow burn, which is not easy to do with storylines like this. They've been going for weeks now, but, the slow burn is slowly building up to what should be a huge payoff. And the reason that I have faith in them is because NXT does these types of storylines well. If this was a storyline on Raw, I would have checked out about a month ago because I would have known ahead of time nothing as good is going to come from this. And if it does, it's going to shock the crud out of me. Whereas in NXT, William Regal, I love Regal's character so much. He is by far the best authority figure character in WWE because he's smart. I mean, he's not purely a babyface. He's not purely a heel. He's almost above it, but he's intelligent. He's like the thinking man's authority figure. And when he pointed out, Tommaso Ciampa's been cleared, but here you are pointing fingers at him. What about your husband? It's like, it's just, he's thinking one step ahead. You're not really going to get the drop on Regal. And if you do, you're going to get every ounce of bile and venom he has to scream at you for it. So I look forward to where they're going to go with this storyline. I will tell you this, though. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not. If it turns out it was Johnny Gargano that went to the dark side, you talk about some amazing writing over the Gargano character the last 2 years. Oh. I mean, that we're approaching like all-time GOAT status for a character arc for Gargano, where he, has to rise above the betrayal of his partner to heroism in New Orleans, and then he plays with fire too long and he starts to lose himself, and then he finally turns to the dark side. Holy crap. That's epic writing right there. So
exactly. And it's something that, they used to do so well back in the day when we of course we are fans of, but it's nice to see that kind of storytelling come back into wrestling because it's greatly needed, it's greatly missed, and I hope they continue this.
Yeah, and if there's any company that could turn perpetual all-time great babyface Johnny Gargano into a heel, I have my faith in Triple H. If anybody can do it, it's Triple H and the NXT crew. So
yeah, absolutely.
My body is ready. Take us to the finish line and let's see where this goes.
Oh, before we do that, we just have one little other thing that we got to touch on. They had a little Keith Lee hype package in there as well. Impressive again. Like, if you guys have never seen Keith Lee, keep your eye on this gentleman. He's a massive, massive man that moves like a cruiserweight. The guy does stuff that a guy his size should not be able to do. He did have a match, his debut NXT match a couple weeks ago. It looked impressive in it, but this guy's going to be a big name in NXT and somebody to keep your eye on for sure.
All I will say about Keith Lee, aside from the fact that I'm ready to bask in his glory, is I'm waiting for two things, and two things only. The showdown with Laura Sullivan, because it's coming. And I want to see Keith Lee in an NXT ring with Matt Riddle, because if you've ever seen Matt Riddle wrestle Keith Lee before, there's one spot that everybody recognizes when Keith Lee just straight up jacks the snot out of Matt Riddle and sends him flying all the way across the ring. They do that in an NXT setting in Full Sail or at a takeover. It's going to be one of the all-time great spots in NXT history. I'm waiting for Keith Lee and Matt Riddle to wrestle in NXT. Triple H, my body is ready. Give it to me. I can handle it, man. Please. Thank you.
Absolutely. That is a dream match that we both can look forward to. And right now, we are going to recap a dream match that occurred last night. And holy hell, if you haven't seen this, saddle up, put on your seatbelt, get comfortable, and enjoy the ride, because holy cow, is this a match.
We talked about it earlier. With just a few weeks of build, this match felt more important than 95% of anything else going on in the company. It felt from the moment they came out a huge, big fight feel. One of the great things about this match, the crowd. So many times now, especially if you're online for any length of time, people talk about how modern crowds detract from wrestling. They are just, they're a drain on it. They don't react like they should, what have you. This match, this crowd at Full Sail, they were jacked from the moment it started. The dueling chants, Ricochet and Bruiserweight, they're so similar. They were bleeding into each other, and it's like, I think they're chanting Bruiserweight, but I almost hear Ricochet chants in there too. And then you hear the announcers talk about the chants bleeding together, and you see people, some in the crowd are mouthing Ricochet while someone beside them is mouthing Bruiserweight. And so they blended together. It was just like this cacophony of, just awesome energy and emotion in the crowd. I've never seen a crowd this excited for basic mat wrestling, which is really what the first half of the match was. It was good, standard mat wrestling, joint manipulation. Marty Jones was raising a pint somewhere in these guys' honor. They were just sitting there, just working basic holds. But this crowd popped for every single thing they did. It was like Austin Rock levels of excitement in the Full Sail environment for simple, straightforward storytelling. And then the match picked up at the halfway point, and I thought the crowd was about to pass out from excitement. So, kudos to you, Full Sail. You brought your A game for this match. I could not approve of you more right now. But just the way the commentator sold it, I am the world's biggest Mauro Ronaldo mark. Mauro, open invitation, buddy. Microphone, golden microphone, open for you too. I love the way they sold it. I loved the big fight feel. Champion versus champion is a gimmick I love. I love when they really establish the reverence for both championships. That on-screen graphic where they had title for title and the North American and UK titles were kind of merged into one title. That split screen effect they did almost. That was so cool looking. Probably two, of the top three looking belts in the company right now, in addition to the Intercontinental title on the main roster. I love the North American title and its retro feel, and the UK title is probably the most beautiful title of that style. So, what can you say? The match itself lived up to all the hype and then some. Couple of big spots that stuck out. That Poison Rana that Ricochet hit on Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne, of course, with the finger manipulation. Marty Scurll would be proud. Ricochet doing like the Matrix, run up the steel post out on the apron and then getting clobbered on the floor. Just, what can you say? These guys just laid it all out on there. Another match that you want to see like 500 more times. Just excellent, excellent. It was a mat wrestling clinic, then it turned into that big fighting spirit, strong style that we love about NXT. It's just everything good about this brand rolled up into one seminal match. And then those jerks, Undisputed Era, of course, had to ruin it. The bastards. I'm going to grab some more popcorn and enjoy myself to this. I needed a cigarette when this match was over. It was that good. What were your thoughts on it?
It's pretty much the same. Like, this match absolutely blew me away. Like you said, started slow, started with like the good old school, but not, even though it was old school, it was just so beautifully done. The transitions that these guys were making in their mat grappling was just, they were so crisp. They were so smooth. The reversals were amazingly done. Like you said, Pete Dunne's finger wrist manipulations. Like, I'm sitting there like cringing and closing my fists like, oh, please, that looks so painful. And then they moved into like some of the high spots, like the flatliner, the spike pile drivery hurricanrana thing that Ricochet did, all the stuff on the outside that they went into. Like, this match just builds, and you just when you're ready for the end, and you're all just, I want to know who wins. Like you said, Undisputed Era comes in and ruins what could have been, what was like just an unbelievably incredible match.
There's a non-PG term for what the Undisputed Era did to us tonight, but I'm not going to express it here because I want to keep this a PG show. But they I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with block. Okay. They blocked us
absolutely
tonight from getting a finish, but I mean, you suspected that was a possibility given how they set up the match, and the Undisputed Era's promo last week kind of hinted that, yeah, they could be lurking around. But you know what? This match was incredible. Can't praise it enough, and it really kind of opens the door, and we'll talk about this here in a moment with some of the future directions for NXT. It really opens up a lot of possibilities for the next TakeOver special. It really gives you a lot of options because you know now Pete Dunne, Ricochet, and the War Raiders are all kind of lurking in the periphery of the Undisputed Era. Don't forget, Pete Dunne's got some allies over at NXT UK that can come over. You're starting to get the sense that, you know, there could be a War Games match building here. And not only would it be a hell of a War Games match, but it would justify the gimmick too. So we'll talk about that here momentarily. But as far as this match goes, you know, title for title, great gimmick, great match. Probably the best NXT match I've seen in quite a while on basic NXT television. And it could be right up there with some of the TakeOver matches. I don't think it's the match of the year because we've got, you know, Gargano and Ciampa from New Orleans and Gargano and Almas from Philadelphia still to consider. But damn, it's up there. It is definitely up there. One of the television matches of the year for absolute certainty.
Oh, absolutely. And by far the match of the week on WWE programming, by far the match of the night. This is something you got to check out. Like, it is, we can't say enough good things about this match. This was just unbelievably good.
Yeah, it's just, this is what it means to be an NXT fan. If you can watch this match and not like what you see, then honestly, you're wasting your time on this whole wrestling thing. Just, if you don't like this match, maybe wrestling's not for you. So it was a great episode. Great episode. Fantastic.
Another solid A episode for me, just on the strength of that final match. The rest of the stuff was good. That match put her right up over the top. Like, just a great show. If you want 2 hours of solid, great wrestling that you're going to enjoy, check out these two shows because you're not going to see much better out there.
Yeah, agreed. And that kind of leads into really what is pretty much the top headline that we want to cover this week. Is the fact that, you know, last night we had both 205 Live and NXT. For the first time, 205 Live is not following SmackDown. It's on a new night. That news broke late last week. We put a link up to it on our Twitter feed. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, the information is down in the info box. But one of the segments that we want to do for our show is to give you the news headlines on NXT 205 Live and Performance Center as it comes in. We got some headlines this week to cover. New night. First of all, I'll play Cronkite here to you and ask you, what did you think about being back-to-back NXT and 205 Live here? Did you like that? Does it make it harder for you to follow the shows, or do you think that it creates like a nice little wrestling block for you on Wednesdays?
I personally enjoyed it, and I think it does create a nice little wrestling block. It's 2 hours for a show. It's the length of a movie. It's not something that's undoable. It's something that you can easily fit into your schedule. Well, for the most part, easily fit into your schedule. And I liked it. I think that they work well together as a pair. And if they continue doing this in this way going forward, I'm on board. I really like it.
Yeah, I think that it does create a nice little block because 205 Live has always felt closer to NXT than it did Raw or SmackDown, especially when Triple H's crew took over last winter. It's kind of had that NXT vibe about it over the last 6 or 7 months. And so to put it on Wednesday nights before NXT, we shouldn't undersell the Mae Young Classic either, because that's another hour of content right after. You get 3 hours of great wrestling on Wednesdays. So it kind of gives you something to look forward to at midweek. But the Mae Young Classic obviously is going to wrap up. Now, it remains to be seen whether 205 Live will remain on Wednesdays permanently, or if this is just for the duration of the Mixed Match Challenge, which is going on after SmackDown right now. Don't know for sure. how that's going to work out. One benefit that we brought up earlier that we should talk about here, the crowds were definitely more active for this week's episode of 205 Live in Tulsa than they were the week before in Lafayette, Louisiana. And the big difference is when 205 Live was recorded. 205 Live went before SmackDown for the first time this week. So you got crowds that are just getting to the arena. They're up. The energy's high. They haven't been worn out by 2 hours of SmackDown. And it made a difference. I think it made a big difference. You saw a definite improvement in crowd response, not just in the main event, but also the crowd was working with the opening act, too. When TJP was working his heel holds on Lince Dorado, they were chanting for Lucha House Party, which I don't think I've ever heard someone chant for Lucha House Party. Not like that, at least. It was a positive development. So if they're sticking on Wednesdays, that could be a sign that we could be getting better crowds in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love seeing the fact that the crowds are getting into it, because these guys deserve the crowd participation. They put on a great show, and it was sometimes a little disappointing to see the way the crowd has reacted to excellent matches. So yeah, no, I think it was a positive for them as a whole, and we'll see how things go moving forward here.
Do you think that the crowd reaction in the past has been the weak link for 205 Live? Would you say that would be the show's biggest failing since it was begun a couple of months ago, or well, last year or 2 years ago now, I guess?
You know, I would think so, because they've always been putting on solid matches, even when they first started. I mean, they got away a little bit in the middle there, but there was always still good matches in the mix. But yeah, it just seemed like the crowd didn't care, and sometimes, you know, when you have that crowd attitude, you as a viewer are like, oh, they don't care. Why should I care? But I mean, you see what's going on the screen. It's good action. And so seeing the crowd get into it and be behind them, I think is nothing but a boon for the brand.
It's going to be interesting to see if they keep this up. Now, obviously, the logistics of calling a show live when it's not live is it's one of those little things they're going to have to figure out. That could be a rebranding of the show in the future, maybe if they decide to leave it on Wednesdays. And like we said, it could be back on Tuesday nights after the Mixed Match Challenge ends. But to that end, there's something else that's been happening that we really need to discuss over the last couple of weeks in particular, and this past Monday was no exception. The cruiserweights are starting to filter back onto Raw. And we saw this with Drake Maverick when he became the manager of the AOP, the former Authors of Pain. Now we're starting to see Lio Rush hang around Bobby Lashley. He's been on the show the last couple of weeks. We also saw Drew Gulak during the big beatdown segment of the heels on the Shield a couple of weeks ago. And so you're starting to see some of the talent from 205 Live filter back onto Raw. And that begs the million-dollar question. And I'm going to pose this to you and let you weigh in on this first, because it really is kind of the underlying question that all 205 Live fans need to be asking themselves right now. Are they filtering these talents back onto Raw because they want to give them extra exposure? Or are they starting to cherry pick the best talents from 205 Live because they may not be having a 205 Live in the near future?
Yeah, that's something that I sure hope that it's not the second part of that. I hope that they're just pulling guys that have the charisma that they can do something with on the main roster. And arguably, like, so far, it's managerial roles, and the people that they put them with, obviously, like, there's no arguing that AOP and Bobby Lashley need a mouthpiece with them. And they probably picked the two strongest talkers that 205 Live has to put with those guys. So I'm hoping that it's just to give some exposure to some talents that may not be as well known to the WWE universe, but I very, very, very much hope that this is not, a death knell for 205 Live, because that would be a sad day to see this content go, because it's definitely well worth the time to watch.
Absolutely, cosigns. Obviously, we chose 205 Live to include on this podcast because we both enjoy it so much, and it's really become one of those little safety valves where during the week, no matter what goes on the main roster, you have something to look forward to with the cruiserweights, who are basically kind of a bridge between NXT and the main roster, I guess, in the presentation and the style of the matches. Honestly, I haven't heard anything about NXT about 205 Live being shut down completely. I know that there were concerns at different points about the viewership on the network, apparently using metrics to keep track of who's watching what, that there were some concerns about the numbers, especially earlier this year. Now, as with any major change to a wrestling brand, it takes time for those changes to kind of filter down. I think, if you're looking for anecdotal evidence, last night was a good sign in terms of the crowd participation in the matches. They were obviously plugged into what was going on. They had an awareness of who everyone was. And Tulsa, Oklahoma is not exactly what you would consider a smart, heavy town, at least not in 2018. Maybe 30 years ago in Mid-South, it would be kind of a smart town maybe. But in 2018, Tulsa, Oklahoma is definitely one of those, random stops where it's a good way to feel out who the crowds are connecting with. And they seem to be into the whole show last night. So it's a good sign, I think, anecdotally, that crowds are kind of picking up on some of the storylines. And that's another benefit and a positive thing, I think, for the health of the show, is that 205 Live's creative team is continuing to script long-term storylines. We've got TJP's character arc kind of simmering on the undercard. You've got the Leo Rush, Noam Dar feud that's kind of been building for a few weeks now. Hideo Itami and Mustafa Ali have a feud to settle. Of course, Cedric Alexander has been mixed up with Drew Gulak and his friends. Now we're going into the Buddy Murphy storyline from Melbourne. So they're doing a good job of creating episodic television week to week and give you a reason to keep tuning in. We'll have to see. I'm with you completely 100%. I hope they're just trying to get some of the shining stars off of 205 Live and give them a chance to expand their horizons on Raw. There are definitely some talents that I would love for SmackDown to get a hold of. When Cedric Alexander, whenever he does drop the title, I think Cedric Alexander could be a huge player for the company, and I would love to see him move up to Raw or SmackDown and maybe enter one of the mid-card title pictures. Buddy Murphy's got a huge future ahead of him. I think Mustafa Ali could be something really special one day as well. He reminds me so much of like a young Seth Rollins in the way he moves, and he's just got that cool vibe about him. So there's too much talent on 205 Live just to shut it down willy-nilly. But I do think it is worth considering, if we see more 205 Live stars start to filter off of the show onto Raw or SmackDown, it could be a sign of changes to come. So we'll just have to wait and see on that front, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're sitting right now, and we'll monitor all developments on that and keep you abreast of what's happening for sure. Just speaking of Alexander going to SmackDown, I don't know if you saw SmackDown last night and saw the AJ Styles Almas match, but I was just thinking, could you imagine a Cedric Alexander versus Sienna Almas match? Like, sign me up for that if he moves up to SmackDown.
Go home, 2018. You're drunk. That's all I got to say. I mean, and I was thinking about that, and we were in the Cage Side Seats thread last night. I was during the NXT show, and it dawned on me, right before we got Pete Dunne versus Ricochet, we got a Keith Lee video package. I'm like, 2018 is the strangest timeline. I could never have imagined 2 or 3 years ago I would be watching, Pete Dunne, Ricochet in NXT, and oh, by the way, here's Keith Lee, and oh, by the way, here's War Machine, from Japan, and oh, by the way, here comes some of the best female talent in the world for the Mae Young Classic. There's just so much pure talent in the WWE system that people today, fans, are, on the one hand, they're blessed with an abundance of just world-class performers, the likes of which I've never seen. And you and I have been fans for a long, long time. We remember the days when we were lucky if we got, the Minotaur or, the Berserker as one of the big names on a TV show. Okay, so we remember the lean times, when our best shot was Hakushi in '95. So it's on the one hand, we've just got so many incredible performers to look forward to seeing on all these shows. At the same time, WWE, you've got like every ingredient possible to make a 5-star meal every show. What are you doing? Like, how much of this talent are you just going to let rot on the shelf? Take advantage of some of this talent that you have stockpiled all over the place. Is there any real reason why the Undisputed Era shouldn't be tearing it up on Raw right now? Outside of, we don't want Undisputed Era to go to Raw because we know they'll die a slow death from creative there. I mean, does Ricochet really need to be in NXT all that much longer when the dude is like a freak of nature that defies the laws of physics and could pop any crowd in any country, any arena in the country? Is Tommaso Ciampa really in need of more development? I mean, he's already the best heel of the last 30 years. The dude requires arm protection depending on where he goes in some markets. It's like you've got this incredible system of talent, and we're spoiled rotten as fans of 205 Live and NXT. It just makes you wonder if the WWE's main roster could make better use of the talent they have at their disposal. Is it worth sacrificing some of the quality on Wednesday night to make Monday and Tuesday nights better? That's a tough question. It's a tough question that you have to ponder. Everybody does. I mean, like, is it worth the sacrifice for you to weaken NXT if it means making Raw and SmackDown stronger? Or do you prefer just to have NXT as kind of a escape valve during the week?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the escape valve that NXT is, but as you've said, like it's getting crowded there. Some of these guys eventually are going to have to move. The nice thing is that at least the cupboards are well stocked, and we know that when those acts move, that NXT is going to continue putting out quality programming, and we can only hope that the main roster gets their act together a little more and does something with these talents that that they don't get buried, that they don't go getting lost to the shuffle. Because you nailed it. Like the amount of talent that is in the WWE system from top to bottom right now is unparalleled in the history of wrestling. Like it's incredible. Like they've got arguably the best people on the planet in some cases. I mean, obviously New Japan has some great guys. You guys got guys like Walter out there that are part of the WWE system. And these guys are all great talents, but overall, like the majority of the best wrestlers in the world are in the WWE system right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you're looking like maybe like the top 50, I would say over half are probably in the system in some level, or at least have been with the company at some point. Even in New Japan, you have guys like Kenny Omega, Juice Robinson, the Young Bucks, Kota Ibushi, who have had varying levels of involvement with the WWE in the past. And then you have, obviously your talent like Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Minoru Suzuki, all of these great names that have kind of made Japanese wrestling what it is the last 10 to 20 years. But, the WWE, this could go down as the strongest roster from top to bottom they've ever had. And they're not done. They're still adding talent left and right. And it's becoming apparent, I think, when you look at events like the Battle for Los Angeles or any of the big super shows that you'll see put on during the weekends of the big shows, like WrestleMania weekend, where they're importing all of this talent from all over the world. And it's getting harder and harder as the years go by to fill out some of these shows because so much of the talent is being gobbled up by WWE. One of the great markets for wrestling over the last 10 years has been the British independent scene. And now with working agreements with Progress and, Rev Pro and the creation of NXT UK, you've got an entire pipeline of new talent being filtered into the WWE system through NXT UK. People like Pete Dunne, Tyler Bates, Tony Storm, Tegan Knox comes to mind. just an incredible wealth. And Jenny, obviously, you still have sources of non-WWE talent out there. Whether you're looking at New Japan Pro Wrestling or what Impact and Ring of Honor are doing these days, or what Shimmer or Stardom are up to for women's wrestling. But the field has never been thinner than it is now. WWE has got a full house, and it just, on the one hand, you're glad that you get the products you do, like NXT, the Mae Young Classic, 205 Live. But boy, you wonder, what if Triple H was in charge of everything and could turn the main roster shows into sort of a hybrid between main roster product and 205 Live and NXT. What would the wrestling landscape look like? Because if WWE used this roster to the fullest extent, there ain't no company in the world that can stand up to them. Not even New Japan. And I'm the biggest New Japan mark there is. It's just the level of talent they have. So it's a mixed blessing, I guess. We love to cover 205 Live. We love to cover NXT. But the fact that they keep so much talent stockpiled in NXT and 205 Live, we pay a price for that on the main roster. So it's a mixed blessing. We have to take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, there's not much more else to say on that. And like you said, down the road, if and when Triple H gets the reins of WWE, maybe we'll see some amazing changes. And hey, maybe we're looking at a possible another golden age of wrestling.
Well, it can't get worse. It can't get worse than it is now. So, we're kind of bottomed out. It's not like it's got to go up from here. You would hope so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, is there any other news that you want to touch on here?
Well, I tell you what, I don't know anything that we need to cover tonight necessarily. I do think, we're going to be needing to start looking forward next week to TakeOver War Games. Next week will be the last week of September, if I'm not mistaken, close to it. So we're kind of getting onto that point where we're going to start seeing some of the storylines that are going to lead us through November to play out. We definitely need to take a look at our Power 5 ranking, though. That is absolutely something we should do. Because I know we talked before the show went on the air. This was even more of a challenge this week to figure out who the number one was as compared to last week. That's how good the top two matches of the night were.
Yeah, and honestly, all four of our top positions are pretty much interchangeable in this Power 5 this week. And if you don't like our ranking and you want to tell us that we were wrong and you think somebody else should be number one, please feel free to hit us up on Twitter or send an email, and we'll respond and listen to your arguments
and politely tell you why you're wrong. I just wanted to throw that in there, but
yes, absolutely. And to start off our Power 5 for this week, we have our number 5 entrant, one of the members of the women's tag match that started off NXT. We have Miss Lacey Evans. What do you got to say about Miss Evans there, Biff?
She has improved so much over the last year. I got a chance to see her in person for the first time in April, shortly before TakeOver New Orleans. They had a match filmed with her and Kairi Sane before the pay-per-view started. I was not moved all that much by what I saw. It wasn't very remarkable. Didn't really stand out. She's really come a long way in the last 6 months. I've really enjoyed watching her progression. I think she's really starting to pick up kind of the nuances of that good classic wrestling heel. Had some great psychology tonight last night in the tag match. Just a solid worker, and she's really come a long way. Can't say enough good words about her. Lacey Evans at number 5, pretty much the only difficult choice in terms of who to include. The next 4, we all agreed they had to be in some order. But I'm going to let you announce number 4 and give your thoughts, because I know how much you enjoyed one of the participants from last night in at number 4.
Yes, and our number 4 position this week is Drew Gulak, the challenger to Cedric Alexander's Cruiserweight Championship on 205 Live. You know what? I can't say enough good things about Gulak. I love the fact that he stands out from the rest of the high flyers on the crowd. I love the storytelling that he put forth in this match. Starting with trying to get the Gulak right off the start there. The multiple attempts, the taking to the top rope to show how serious he was about this championship match. And the guy took a beating in this match. Like he was looking pretty beat up by the end of it, with the little scrapes on the nose, and it looked like his one eye was a little bit swollen. So number 4 position goes to Mr. Drew Gulak.
This was a tough call. The top 4 could have really been arranged in any order, and we really didn't have too much in the way of complaint. But our number 3 ranking this week is very much like Drew Gulak in style and substance. He's just there to beat you up, stretch you, to make you cry a little bit. A master of joint manipulation. He's got that British strong style down pat. Our number 3 rank this week is the Bruiserweight UK champion Pete Dunne. Outstanding performance last night in NXT in the title for title main event. Honestly, he could have been number 1 easily. That just shows you how good this week of programming was on the network. Pete Dunne just continues to be an absolute gem. Every time he's on, he's just got that aura about him that makes you sit up and take notice. He's one of my favorite performers in the WWE system right now. I am so looking forward to seeing more of him, to see if we get another match with Ricochet down the line, whether they team up to take on Undisputed Era again. There's just so many different paths that you could take with him. But one thing is for sure, we haven't heard the last of Pete Dunne. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come.
Yeah, and it's incredible to think that this guy is still, what is he, in his 20s? Like he's got such a bright future ahead of him. He's such a joy to watch. He's a complete package. He's a throwback to the old school mat grapplers. He's got the little bit of the high flying stuff, and then the mat moves that man has, and the way he works the joints and the fingers. Oh, it's a joy to watch. And leading into our number 2 spot, I know that you are super high on this gentleman, so take it away with our number 2, Mr. Cedric Alexander.
Well, they call him the Queen City's favorite son, and he is doing the city of Charlotte proud, especially in the last couple of weeks, dealing with all of the turmoil from Hurricane Florence. It's also nice just to be able to kind of sit back and watch good wrestling. Cedric Alexander presented that in abundance this week. Just an incredible match and another string of classic matches he's been putting on all year. Cedric Alexander, the total package as far as I'm concerned, he has got absolute main event potential. All I have to do is turn him loose. He's one of the best workers in the company. Another standout match with Drew Gulak. They match well. Cedric Alexander has an innate ability to match his style with the style of the wrestler he's competing against. The style he works against Mustafa Ali is not the same as what he works against Drew Gulak, and it's not the same as what he'll work against Buddy Murphy. He's adaptable. He's versatile. He is just an absolute joy to watch. I love Cedric Alexander's matches. I love him as a person. He just seems like an awesome guy. I am very proud to call him my Cruiserweight champion. I'm very proud to call him one of my favorite wrestlers. I'm proud to call him one of my favorite charlatans. Queen City's favorite son, Age of Alexander, baby. Cedric Alexander coming in number 2 this week on our Power 5. But, of course, that means we have someone else at number 1. And if he can unseat Cedric Alexander and Pete Dunne and Drew Gulak from consideration, you know he had a special night last night. And there's no suspense as to who this number 1 is. Greg, I'm going to let you do the honors here because, my God, this guy had a hell of a week.
Oh, and number 1 spot this week goes to none other than Ricochet. What can we say about Ricochet? This man is incredible. Like he held his own on the mat with arguably one of the best mat wrestlers that's currently out there in Pete Dunne. The high flying moves that he can pull out just out of seemingly nowhere make your jaw drop every time you see this man in the mat in a ring in a match. And then just the absolute power that he has, the deadlifts that he pulled off of Pete Dunne. And I don't know if you've ever seen him in any other organizations, but the power that this man packs into the size that he is incredible. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Ricochet. Like, he is amazing and is well deserving of our number one spot this week. Do you have anything to add on Ricochet, Biff?
There's certain people that come along every once in a generation that just defy logic. Ricochet, there's no reason he should be as strong as he is. There's no reason he should be as agile as he is. And there's something about Ricochet's presentation in the ring that I absolutely love. Ricochet is cool. He's got a coolness about him. He's got the simple swagger of a less flamboyant Rob Van Dam. That's the best way I can describe it. Rob Van Dam had that really crazy agility as well. Ricochet's got the agility. Ricochet is a world-class wrestler. He can grapple. He's got mat wrestling skills. He's got the high flying, and he's got the swagger. You know, we'll never forget doing that planche out to confront Velveteen Dream a few months ago. Here again in this match, big fight feel, and he carried his end like a champ. You know, just a tremendous, tremendous performer. Blows your mind when you see some of the stuff that he's doing. You shouldn't be able to do some of the stuff he does. I mean, he's just literally, he is a once-in-a-generation talent. He's transcended in the ring. He's got the entire world waiting for him. He's going to be a world champion for somebody, whether WWE capitalizes on him or not. He's got world championship potential easy. Ricochet is a solid, solid choice for number one on this week's Power 5. But like you said, you know, we talked about it. Any of the top four could have found their way to number one this week. It was just such a strong week for the two main events. The last two shows were built on those main events, and those main events delivered huge. So just a great week of pro wrestling.
Absolutely, and I believe at that point we can pretty much wrap up for the morning here. Biff, you want to throw out some recommendations and some shout outs to some friends of the show here?
Yeah, we can do that right quick. Obviously, we have some affiliated shows that we want to kind of give some love to. And also, while we're on the subject, I just want to personally thank everyone, and I know Greg feels the same way. I want to thank everyone for the kind words and the compliments that you paid us this week. The feedback from last week's debut episode was fantastic. Everyone that listened, everyone that weighed in, I got several messages personally. Greg, I'm sure you got a few as well. Just people, you know, really complimenting the show. Thank you so much for all the kind words. Thank you for listening. It was a great show last week, a great way to kick off this new program. Thank you so much for all your support. Some of our biggest support, obviously, comes from the godfather of podcasting, Taker's Minion himself with Mr. Doc Sinju. They have the Shooting the Breeze podcast, which we've both had the pleasure of guest hosting on. That drops every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, on YouTube. You can find the advert threads over at Cage Side Seats. In addition, my good buddy, Greg Gonsalves, with the Two Guys, One Sport with Chris Colgan. That drops Thursday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Be sure to check out that show later tonight. They're going to have an excellent show for you. It's an excellent show every week. It's one of the most fun podcasts to listen to out there. So definitely give Chris and George some love. That's with Two Guys, One Sport, Thursday evenings. And then be sure to check out our sister show, Monday nights, 8 p.m. I don't even know the time of my own show. 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Monday evenings. It is the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. We had a hell of a show Monday. If you haven't got a chance to listen to it, we're fantasy drafting all-time dream promotions. And there's a lot of intrigue going on behind the scenes, people talking about trades and trying to figure out who's taking who. It was so much fun. We're going to extend it out another week. We're going to be doing night 2 of our draft next Monday. So be sure to check that out. Of course, the advert threads for Cage Side Seats has a link to the Connoisseurs of Wrestling. And we've got an advert thread for Grounds for Development. We have polls up each week, getting a sense of what you want to see covered. A couple of you voted last week in the poll, talked about some of the performers you'd like to see us talk about in the weeks to come, and we'll be definitely getting some of that information ready for you. So be sure to check out the advert thread for our show, Grounds for Development, over at Cage Side Seats in the fan post section. You can vote on our polls, wreck the threads. You'll have a live link to each video every week. Of course, we drop new content every Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Sometimes the video goes up a little bit earlier than that, but we'll have the thread ready to go for you. Gives you a highlight of everything we'll be talking about. Of course, the info box down below here on YouTube has got links to our Twitter, both our personal Twitters and to the show's Twitter. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to hit us up via email or on Twitter or in the comments here. We'll be sure to get back in touch with you. We value all the input we get. We thank everyone for their kind words. It's been a great first week for the Grounds for Development team, and I know that there's big things in store for us. This show's going to go really far. And so, Greg, where can they find you during the week if they want to get in touch with you?
First off, I want to just echo your sentiments there. Once again, I also got several personal messages, and thank you all that have given us your support and your listens. And we are going to continue to strive to give you the best podcast that we possibly can, and look forward to all comments and criticisms. But you can find me hanging out on cage side seats in the threads. I'm under the name the Saskatchewan Spinning Nerve Hold. You can also catch me on Twitter at GW Klein, KLEIN 75. And also through the emails here. Biff, where can they find you?
I'm also over at Cage Side most days and nights when I'm not being too lazy to hop on the computer. Biff Kensington is my handle over there. And, of course, I'm at Real Deal Biff, DILL like the pickle. Don't ask. It's a long story. But, again, all the information down in the doobly-doo down below. Don't forget to be awesome, be kind, be excellent to one another. It's been another great show. And if you don't catch us at Cage Side Seats, be sure to catch us next week as we're back with a brand new episode of Grounds for Development. I tell you what, man, we've got some good matches to look forward to next week. I mean, I don't know if it's going to top this week, but there's some matches coming up on 205 Live and NXT that have me pretty excited. So I think we're going to have a pretty fun week next week.
I do as well, and look forward to covering everything that comes our way. So for Biff Kensington, I am Greg the Hold, and this has been the second episode of Grounds for Development. Thanks for the listen, and I hope you enjoy the show going forward.
Take care, guys.